Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone picked you first? Not because they needed something, not because everyone else was busy, but because they actually wanted you there. For some people, that answer is hard, because they live in a constant state of being second choice. They wake up and they're ready to help, ready to listen, ready to show up. And people know this about them, so they use it, not out of meanness usually, just because they can. Why would you make the effort to reach out to someone when you know they'll always be there anyway? Carl Jung, one of the most important psychologists ever, talked about something called archetypes. These are like blueprints in the human mind, universal patterns that show up in everyone's life in different ways. One of these archetypes is called the helper. The helper is the person who finds their worth in serving others. They get their sense of belonging by being useful, by being needed, by showing up when no one else does. But here's the problem Jung pointed out. When you become the helper, you start to disappear. Your own needs, your own desires, your own life becomes less important than what other people need from you. The helper archetype sounds noble on the surface, but Jung understood something deeper. He saw that people who live as helpers often aren't doing it because they're selfless. They're doing it because they learned early on that this is the only way they matter. This is the only way they belong. So they keep helping and helping and helping. They give and give and give. But inside there's a part of them that's dying, a part that's invisible, a part that nobody sees because they've hidden it so well. And here's what's really interesting. They didn't just end up as the backup friend by accident. According to Jung's work, this pattern started way back, in childhood, in how they learned to survive emotionally, in what they had to do to be loved. And once that pattern gets set, it keeps repeating, over and over, in every relationship, in every friendship, until one day they realize they're not living their own life anymore. They're living in the background of everyone else's story. You might think the problem with being a backup friend is just feeling sad sometimes, that you miss out on plans or feel a little lonely. But that's not the real problem. That's just the surface. The real problem is much darker. When you spend years being the backup friend, something happens inside your brain. You start to believe something fundamental about yourself. You believe that you're only valuable when you're useful, only worthy when you're helping, only lovable when you're giving. This belief doesn't stay small, it grows. It spreads into every part of your life, your work, your relationships, your family, even how you treat yourself. You start to abandon yourself. You cancel your own plans to help someone else. You ignore your own pain to manage someone else's feelings. You shrink yourself smaller and smaller so other people can feel bigger. And here's the scary part. Most backup friends don't even know this is happening. They think they're just being kind. They think they're just being a good person. But underneath, there's this constant quiet voice telling them they're not enough. Not enough on their own. Not enough just for existing. They have to earn their place. Every single day, Jung called this part of us the shadow. The parts we hide. The parts we reject about ourselves. For backup friends, their needs, their desires, their real self becomes the shadow while they wear a mask of endless availability. And wearing that mask every single day is exhausting. Not just physically, spiritually, emotionally. Something inside them starts to break slowly. They get burnt out. They feel resentment building that they can't explain. They feel invisible even in rooms full of people who care about them. But here's what matters most. Understanding this isn't just about feeling sorry for yourself. It's about recognizing that this pattern is destroying you from the inside. And it's destroying the possibility of having real, honest relationships where both people actually matter. Because as long as you're the backup friend, you're not being yourself. And nobody can love the real you if they only know the mask. So where does the helper archetype actually come from? It doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It gets built. Usually in childhood. Think about what happens when you're a kid and you do something helpful. Your parents notice. They praise you. You're such a good kid. You're so responsible. You're so easy. And suddenly you've discovered the formula. The way to get love isn't to just exist. It's to be useful. Maybe your parents were stressed and overwhelmed. So you learn to be the calm one. The one who doesn't cause problems. The one who helps instead of asking for help. Or maybe there was conflict in your family and you became the peacemaker. The one who could smooth things over, make everyone feel okay again. You learned that your job was to manage everyone else's emotions so you could feel safe. This isn't abuse. It's not dramatic. It's just normal parenting. But what it teaches you is this. Your needs don't matter as much as other people's needs. Your feelings aren't as important as keeping the peace. Your life is supposed to be about helping, not about you. And a kid's brain doesn't think critically. A kid just thinks, okay, this is how the world works. This is what I have to do to be loved. So that kid grows up. They become the helper in every situation. At school, they're the student who helps struggling classmates. At work, they're the employee who stays late, helps colleagues, never says no. In friendships, they're the person everyone calls when they need something. And for a while, this feels good. They feel important, needed, special even. Like they have a purpose. But then something shifts. The helper starts to realize that people only call when they need something. Nobody just checks in to see how they're doing. Nobody remembers their birthday unless they post about it. Nobody asks them for advice about their own life. They're there when it's convenient, but forgotten when it's not, and here's the trap. The helper doesn't know how to stop, because if they stop being helpful, they don't know who they are anymore. If they stop giving, what's their value? This is where Jung's work gets really interesting. He said that these archetypes are powerful because they feel true. They feel like your real personality, but they're not. They're just a role, a costume you put on so long ago that you forgot you were wearing it. And the tragedy is that underneath the helper, there's a whole other person. Someone with dreams, someone with needs, someone who deserves to be first sometimes too. But that person is so buried under years of helping that they've become invisible, even to themselves. The real problem isn't that being helpful is bad. It's that the helper never learned the second part of being human. They learned to give, but nobody taught them how to receive. Nobody taught them that asking for help isn't selfish, that having needs doesn't make you a burden, that you can be loved just for existing, not just for being useful. Here's something people don't want to admit. Friendship is not random. There's an actual system, an invisible ranking that happens naturally in every group, and most people know exactly where they stand on that list. They just pretend they don't. Think about your friend group right now. You know who you'd call first if you got good news. You know who you'd invite if you could only bring one person. You know who you'd text at midnight just to talk. And you also know who you'd call when everyone else said no. That's not mean. That's just how human beings work. We have preferences. We rank things. And yes, we rank people. But here's where it gets interesting. The backup friend gets selected into that position for very specific reasons. And it's not because they're boring or unlikable. It's actually the opposite. Backup friends get chosen because they're reliable, because they don't cause drama, because they're always available, because they make you feel okay about yourself. You never have to worry that they'll bail on you. You never have to worry that they'll be too busy. And that makes them incredibly valuable to have around. But here's the psychological trap. That same reliability works against them. Think about it like this. If you have a friend who's always free, why would you make an effort to see them? If you have someone who always says yes, why would you check in or show up early or do the work? There's no urgency. There's no scarcity. In human psychology, we want what's hard to get. We pursue what might say no. We make effort for people who might not have time for us. But the backup friend signals the opposite. They signal, I'll always be here, no matter what. Just call me when you need me. So people don't call. Not to just hang out. Not to check in. They call when they need something. And the backup friend, without even realizing it, has trained everyone to treat them this way. They've communicated with their availability that they exist to serve, not to participate equally, not to bring their own needs to the table, but to be there when useful. And here's the thing that makes it worse. The backup friend knows this is happening. On some level, they see it. They feel the pattern repeating, but they don't stop, because stopping feels like rejection. If they're not always available, maybe nobody will want them at all. So they keep giving, they keep showing up, they keep being reliable, and everyone keeps using them because why wouldn't you? They've made it so easy. This isn't the fault of the backup friend, but it is their responsibility to change it, because nobody else will. The people using them aren't bad people. They're just taking what's being offered. And what's being offered is endless availability with no boundaries. No wonder the backup friend never gets chosen first. Being the backup friend doesn't just feel bad in the moment, but it creates something much worse. It creates an internal fracture, a split inside you between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. Jung called this the persona. It's the mask you wear for the world. And the backup friend has perfected this mask. They smile when plans get cancelled. They say it's fine when they're forgotten. They laugh it off when they're last pick. They're always understanding, always patient, always okay with it. But inside is a completely different story. Inside there's rage, not the kind that explodes, the kind that sits quiet and eats you alive from within. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, Every time you comfort someone who would never comfort you. Every time you're there for them, and they're not there for you. A little piece of that rage grows. And you can't express it because expressing it would mean being the difficult one, the demanding one, the selfish one. So you bury it. You push it down. You convince yourself that you're fine with it, but you're not fine. Your body knows you're not fine. You start to feel tired all the time. Not physically tired, spiritually tired. Like something inside you is depleted. You go to social events and you're there physically, but you're not really there. You're performing. You're managing. You're making sure everyone around you feels comfortable while you feel nothing. Or you feel everything and have nowhere to put it. Here's what happens next. You start to disconnect from yourself. You don't know what you like anymore. You don't know what you want. When someone asks you what you want to do, you have no answer. Because you've spent so long thinking about what other people want that your own preferences have disappeared. You can tell you exactly what your friends need. You can read their emotions like a book, but you can't read your own. You've become a stranger to yourself. And then the depression comes. Not the kind with a name, just a low-level feeling that something is wrong. That life isn't right. That you're not living. You're existing. You're moving through days. You're doing the things you're supposed to do. But there's no joy in it, because joy requires authenticity. And you've been so focused on being who everyone needs you to be that you forgot how to be yourself. Jung said that when we ignore parts of ourselves, they don't disappear. They become the shadow. And the shadow doesn't stay quiet. It shows up as anxiety, as resentment, as depression, as a feeling that something is deeply wrong but you don't know what it is. And the worst part, the backup friend often doesn't connect these feelings to their role. They think they're just broken. They think something is wrong with them. They don't realize they're suffocating. They don't realize that the cost of being everyone's backup is slowly losing themselves. You'd think that once someone realizes being a backup friend is destroying them, they'd just stop. They'd change. They'd speak up. They'd set boundaries. But they don't, not usually. And there's a reason for that. The pattern is so deeply rooted that breaking it feels like breaking yourself. Here's what happens. The backup friend has spent so many years being praised for being the helper that this identity feels true. It feels real. It feels like who they actually are. When they were younger and they helped, they got attention. They got approval. They felt like they mattered. And their brain learned something important. This is my way. This is who I am. This is what I'm good at. Now imagine spending 20, 30, sometimes 40 years reinforcing that belief. It becomes truth. It becomes your personality. So when you suggest that maybe they should stop being so available, stop helping so much, ask for more from their friendships, it doesn't sound like good advice. It sounds like death. Because if they stop being the helper, who are they? That's the real fear underneath everything. Not the fear of being left alone. The fear of not existing at all if they're not useful. And here's something even more twisted. Sometimes the backup friend gets small moments of validation that keep them trapped. Maybe once a year someone tells them they're such a good friend. Maybe once in a while someone actually does show up for them, and it feels incredible. And that small crumb of validation is enough to keep them hoping. Enough to make them think maybe if they just keep trying, eventually everyone will see their worth. Eventually they'll be chosen first. But it never happens. And they keep waiting. There's also guilt. Massive guilt. If the backup friend says no to helping, they immediately imagine all the consequences. What if that person falls apart? What if they needed me and I wasn't there? What if they think I'm selfish? This guilt is so powerful that it paralyzes them. It makes it impossible to change, because changing means disappointing people. And disappointing people is the one thing they've spent their whole life avoiding. But here's the darkest part. Sometimes the backup friend doesn't want to change because the pattern is familiar. It's comfortable in a strange way. They know how it works. They know their role. And even though it's destroying them, it's predictable. Change is terrifying. Change means uncertainty. Change means they might not know who they are or how to relate to people anymore. So they stay. They keep playing the same role. They keep hoping that somehow, someday it will be different. But it won't be. Not unless they're brave enough to change it. There's a moment. For every backup friend, there's a moment when everything changes. Sometimes it happens slowly. Sometimes it happens all at once. But it always happens. It's the moment when they can't pretend anymore. Maybe it's a birthday. They've been there for everyone else's birthdays. They've organized celebrations. They've remembered when others forgot. And on their birthday, their phone stays quiet. Nobody reaches out. The people they've been there for the most are too busy. And in that moment, something inside them cracks. They realize that all those years of showing up didn't matter. It didn't guarantee anything. Or maybe it's watching someone they were there for be there for someone else. Watching them celebrate someone else's birthday. Watching them make time. Watching them prioritize, just not them. And the realization hits different this time. It's not just sad. It's humiliating, because they finally see the truth. They were never chosen. They were never the priority. They were just the option. Or maybe the moment comes at 3 in the morning when they're having a panic attack and they scroll through their contacts and realize there's nobody they can actually call. Everyone they've helped, everyone they've been there for, all those people, they can't call any of them because they never built the kind of relationship where that was okay. They built relationships where they were the giver, not the receiver. And then there's rage. Real, clear, undeniable rage. Not the buried kind they've been feeling for years. The kind that says enough. This ends now. Some backup friends disappear completely. They stop answering. They stop showing up. It's sudden. It's extreme. It's their only way of saying what they've never been able to say directly. Other backup friends try to change slowly. They start saying no more often. They stop initiating, but they're so programmed to give that even their rebellion is quiet. Here's what's interesting though. This moment of reckoning is actually a gift. It's painful. It's humiliating. It feels like the end of everything, but it's actually the beginning, because you can't change what you won't see. And once you see the truth, once you really feel it, you can't unsee it anymore. You can't go back to pretending. The backup friend is at a crossroads. They can numb it and go back to the pattern, or they can feel it all the way through and actually change. Most people try to go back because going forward is terrifying, but some people don't. Some people look at that moment of reckoning and decide, never again. And that's when the real transformation begins. So what does change actually look like? It's not pretty. It's not inspirational. It's messy and uncomfortable, and it feels wrong for a long time. The first thing the backup friend has to do is say no. Actually say it, out loud to real people. No, I can't help with that. No, I can't make it. No, that doesn't work for me. And when they say these things, something happens. The world doesn't end. The people don't abandon them, but it feels like it will. The anxiety is real. The fear is real, even though the catastrophe isn't. Then comes the second part, asking for things, asking for help, asking to be prioritized. And this is where it gets really hard, because asking means risking rejection. It means saying I matter too. And for someone who's spent their whole life proving their worth through usefulness, asking feels like selfishness. But it's not. It's honesty. It's saying I'm a human with needs, not a machine with an endless supply. Here's what happens next. Some friendships fall apart. The ones that were only built on the backup friend being useful start to crumble. And that's actually good. That's the system cleaning itself. Because real friendship isn't based on one person always giving. Real friendship is based on mutual care, on both people mattering. But something else happens too. Some friendships actually get deeper. Because when you stop performing, when you stop managing everyone's emotions, when you show up as your actual self with actual needs, the people who actually care about you respond differently. They step up, they show up for you, and suddenly you realize what real connection feels like. It's terrifying and it's beautiful at the same time. Jung called this individuation. It's the process of becoming yourself, not the self everyone needs you to be, not the self you've practiced for decades, but the actual you, the one buried underneath all that helpfulness. And when that person starts to emerge, it feels weird. It feels selfish. It feels wrong. But it's not. It's the most real thing they've ever done. The backup friend also has to grieve. They have to mourn the version of themselves they've been sacrificing. They have to feel the anger about all those years of being invisible. They have to cry about the relationships that weren't real. And they have to sit with the guilt of disappointing people. All of that has to move through them. You can't skip the grief. You have to feel every bit of it. But on the other side of that grief is something rare. It's peace. It's the quiet knowledge that you exist, that you matter, not for what you do, just for being alive. And that's worth all the discomfort. Being a backup friend isn't a flaw. It's a wake-up call. Your soul saying it's time to come home. The traits that made you this way aren't bad. Loyalty, empathy, showing up. These are beautiful, but they've been pointing the wrong direction. Loyal to people who weren't loyal back. Empathetic to everyone except yourself. Showing up for people who wouldn't show up for you. Jung said the unlived life lives in the shadow. For backup friends, that's your life. The dreams you never chased. The relationships with people who actually chose you. The version of yourself you could have been, but you're not too late. This doesn't have to be your whole story. It can be the moment you woke up. The moment you looked in the mirror and decided you were worth choosing. The backup friend becomes the main character. The moment they stop performing for others and start living for themselves, maybe people will rise to the occasion. When you show up differently, maybe real friendships are possible. But even if they don't, even if people disappear, you'll have something they never had. You'll have yourself, and that's everything. Because you're the only person you have to live with every single day. You're the only voice in your head every single moment. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's the most human thing you can do.